Barry, thank you for that fittingly Virgilian introduction. As you say, there are parallels between the period of history that I'm going to talk about, what's called the Julian-Claudian period, the first period of the Roman emperors, and what Ian was talking about. I think it's fair to say, though, that the monsters and tyrants that I talk about are generally more fun than solid. They are probably as well known to pornographers as to classicists. And, of course, the theme really that they illustrate, it's the great theme of our day, a theme that I suspect many of you will be in sympathy with, is that how incredibly monstrous and dangerous youth can be when given its head. Power should be left in the hands of oldies. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the theme of the book. And I will illustrate it by just going through a quick sort of roll call of the 5 Julian-Claudian emperors, illustrating exactly why it is a bad idea to give young people absolute control over an enormous world empire. The Julian-Claudian dynasty begins with the great-nephew and adopted son of Julius Caesar, who is born Octavius, but is then adopted by Caesar and so takes on the name Caesar. And when Julius Caesar is assassinated, the young Caesar steps mercilessly up to the plate. Before he is 20, he has raised his own private army. He has made himself consul at the point of the sword, and he has ganged up with Mark Antony, Julius Caesar's great lieutenant, to draw up a hit list of the richest and most influential figure in Rome, slaughter them, take their money, and then use it to raise yet more private army. And in due course, the young Caesar turns on Mark Antony, finishes him off, and ends up in complete control of Rome and Rome's empire. And having done that in the most merciless way, so it is told, for instance, that an assassin, a would-be assassin, was brought into his presence. The young Caesar put his hands on the side of the assassin's head, put the thumbs over the eyeballs, and gouged them out. So he was merciless in person, he was merciless by policy. But having seized control of the Roman Empire, and having reached a certain level of maturity, he then seemed to stage a remarkable transformation. He was given the name of Augustus, which literally means person midway between the earth and the heavens. And he began posing not just as a prince of peace, but tellingly as the father of Rome, of his people, and of the empire. And it's for that reason that to this day the word Augustan has the quality of the Golden Age. And there is the sense that Augustus, this imperious, beautiful figure, was in some way different from Octavius. Of course he wasn't. He was exactly the same person. But essentially what he was, he had become a padrone, he'd become a godfather. And like a mafia boss who shoots up all his rivals and then takes the credit for the resulting peace. Goodness, what's that? It's Augustus calling from the dead. It was essentially a mafia rule. But the Roman people responded to the rule of the father. And so when ultimately Augustus was given the official name, Patriarch, father of his country, it enabled the people that he was now ruling essentially as an autocrat to accept his authority, his dignity, and his power. And from that point on, the ideal relationship between the Roman people and an emperor, an imperator, general, was that of children and father. Now, this was fine with Augustus' successor, a man called Tiberius, his stepson and adopted son, because Tiberius had basically been born old. He never cracked a smile, he'd never asked around. He was just solid, straight down the line, stiff upper lip, doing your duty. Now, when he became emperor, he ruled effectively and well, and then finally he had enough, and he decided, as one would, to retire to the island of Capri. And it was taken for granted by the Romans that the only reason that someone in the public eye would want to retire was because he was a monstrous perv. And so terrible stories were told of Tiberius, the kind of thing that would have got Operation U-Tree straight down to Capri. But I suspect that these stories were grotesquely overdone, that they were the kind of gossip with which those of us who read Private Eye would be all too familiar. Actually, Tiberius seems to have lived a life of model rectitude on Capri. His favourite, he grew types of vegetable. He was a great enthusiast for the cabbage. His idea of a fun night out was to invite people around for a difficult literary quiz. He was kind of definitive Oldie in some way. But the problem was that essentially by this point the Romans found him a bit boring. And they wanted someone a bit more fun to rule them. And so when Tiberius died and he was succeeded by Caligula, be careful what you wish for. Because actually what Caligula was not mad. The famous story about him saying that he wanted to make his horse a consul, it's a joke. What he's doing is he is saying to the Roman elite, all of whom, of course, you can only be consul if you're over 40, so by definition, and it's the elders and betters, what Caligula is doing is saying to these grandees, I can make my horse a consul if I want to. The highest magistracy in Rome is purely within my gift. And he took pleasure in humiliating and degrading and trampling down the aspirations and the ideals of the aged elite. And ultimately, they had enough, they got rid of him. And he was replaced by Claudius, a man who, those of you who've seen or read by Claudius, he had certain disabilities that prevented him from having led the public life that would be normal for a man of his background and class, so he was reduced to, he led the humiliating and demeaning life of a historian. And as a result of that, had great respect for the tradition. He lived as one was expected to, as the Roman aristocrat was expected to. But in time, he was probably poisoned to make way for his own adopted son, the son of his niece and wife, gets complicated at this point, an adorable little scout called Nero. And Nero, in many ways, is an oldie's ultimate nightmare, because what Nero did was basically to lead a completely rock and roll lifestyle. His dislike for the elder generation was such that he had his mother killed. First of all, he bought her a collapsible yacht, and when that failed to dispatch her, he had her killed by his own guards. He accidentally kicked his pregnant wife to death, as you do. I love it, but accidentally. And then he did what I think anyone in that situation would do, which is, you kick your pregnant wife to death. Obviously, you're slightly regretful, you'd like to have her back. So what are you going to do? Obviously, you're going to look around, find a young boy who looks exactly like a dead wife, castrate him, and make him live like a dead. Take on the character, the name, and the appearance of your dead wife from that point on. All the things that Nero did, the things that made him notorious among the Roman elite, that has made him a sort of a byword for depravity ever since, it was basically trying to lead the life of a rock and roll hero. So he famously played the lyre in public. Now, you might sort of get the idea, you have an idea of heaven, of angels playing lyres in heavens. It wasn't like that, it was like headlining at Glastonbury. He killed his mother. He wasn't in any way trying to conceal this. He went to Greece, he played the part of Orestes, who notoriously had killed his mother, on the stage. So he was completely drawing attention to it. And this essentially was the equivalent of winning an Oscar in a major Hollywood production. It's the kind of thing, if you were a sort of young guy now, you take control of the world empire. It's the kind of thing you do. Think Kim Jong-un and be really powerful. And then the final sort of rock and roll thing he did was to enter the Olympics. He entered the chariot race. And he got thrown from the chariot, they brought another chariot on, and he won and finished. Now this sort of, people laugh at this and think, oh, it was all a sham. Actually, it wasn't at all. Nero was racing with 12 horses, not the normal 6. Very, very difficult to control. And imagine being thrown from a chariot, the wheels slicing past you, the hooves of the horses crashing around your head. I think actually to get back into a chariot and then to finish the race, that took some cojones. which of course his wife by this point maybe. So in essence, it's equivalent to winning the Formula One championship. And that's why, although Nero was so calamitous in the end that people decided he had enough, rebellion in the provinces, Nero had himself killed rather than face the music, he was remembered, he was commemorated. And there were those who mourned him. But by and large, the legacy that he left was a terrifying evidence of what happens when the young are given their head. And it's telling that from that point on, by and large, most of the emperors, when they became emperor, were of a distinguished age. And that it wasn't really until Commodus, the guy from Gladiator, that a young man got the rule of the Roman Empire again. And those of you who've seen Gladiator will know that ended disastrously as well. So the concluding lesson, power should be kept in the hands of the Oldies.